Weather. One of the most astonishing forces on Earth, capable of both devastating power and spectacular beauty. Wherever you live on the planet, weather shapes your world. Yet for most of us, how it works is a mystery. To really understand weather, you have to get inside it. So I'm going to strip weather back to basics.
All in the name of science.
Uncovering its secrets in a series of brave, ambitious, and sometimes just plain unlikely experiments.
Well, it certainly feels like a dust storm from here.
To show you weather like you've never seen it before. There is a powerful, invisible force that moves around us, almost unnoticed. A force that drives almost all the extreme weather on our planet. That force is wind. In this program, I'll discover how wind creates that extreme weather, what it's capable of, and just how fast it can go. Along the way, I'll attempt to measure the speed of a tornado right next to the ground.
Oh, that's huge.
I'll create a whirlwind made of fire to discover how a wind becomes a spinning wind. And I'll become one of the few people in history to deliberately walk into the middle of a twister.
I'm going in.
This is said to be the place with the worst weather in the world. A place so forbidding that only the fearless or the foolhardy would want to experience it. So, hazard a guess where we're starting. This is Mount Washington, in the unlikely location of New Hampshire, USA. You wouldn't expect extreme weather to be found in New England. But on April 12, 1934, Mount Washington Weather Station measured one of the fastest wind speeds ever recorded on land. 231 miles an hour. In fact, winds here hit hurricane force more than 100 days a year. Now, bear that in mind during the next couple of minutes. Because I'm about to take a little walk outside.
Okay, just popping out, which is, it turns out, quite a chore out here. I can not only hear the wind around this building, I can feel it. The whole place is vibrating. Oh no, I've forgotten my goggles. This is doing it in the wrong order, and just right. Your eyeballs can freeze. Any exposed skin, you have frostbite on it within 2 or 3 minutes. Right, that's my best hat. I won't get cold with that on. This is to stop my nose falling off, which would be bad because I'd never be able to wear sunglasses again when I want to. Liner gloves. Mittens. Okay. Obviously, I am now obliged by law to say I'm going outside. I might be some time. I mean, that's what I called it, is indoors.
At this point, I think I should try and give you some idea of what I might be in for, with a small demonstration. The lightest wind you can feel on your face is about 5 miles an hour. Enough to rustle this newspaper. 15 miles an hour, and your umbrella gives up the ghost. 25 miles an hour can cause a deck chair to set sail. Followed at 30 miles an hour by your garden furniture. 45, and all hell starts to break loose. Seemingly rigid structures suddenly make a break for it. And at 55 miles an hour, even small buildings are on the move. So why am I telling you all this? Because on Mount Washington, it's currently 65, with gusts reaching a staggering 85 miles an hour.
Believe it or not, I'm actually sheltered at the moment. There's hardly any wind right here because I'm in the lee of the building. It starts about 6 feet that way, and then there's a lot of it. And the only way to demonstrate that is I'm gonna go and stand in it. And for reasons best known to themselves, Brendan and Sean on camera and sound have decided to come with me because they're idiots. So, here we go. Right, walking, not windy, not windy, not windy, oh, getting windy, getting windy. Right. This is about 65, maybe 70 miles an hour worth of wind. But don't forget, this is the site of one of the highest wind speeds ever recorded by man, 231 miles an hour. How must that feel? I'd be gone. They do a calculation around these parts where you take your weight in pounds. I don't know what I am, it's about 150, 160. Halve it, that's the wind speed at which you're going to get into trouble, which is about this wind speed. There are 3 major storm systems that meet right here. Sort of long-distance weather patterns. And that corner behind me is the most exposed place, which should make that the windiest spot on this whole mountain.
But lots of places have storm systems. Why is it here that's so windy?
Don't worry about this. They said it was just a precaution. So, take my hat, the one that caused this in the first place. Let's pretend this is Mount Washington. This desk fan is the wind. And we can see the wind hitting the top of the mountain. Mount Washington is the highest thing for miles around. So although there are hills here and a town here, ski resort there, they make no difference to the wind hitting Mount Washington. They're not high enough as obstacles to block it or disrupt its flow, so any wind there is will hit the top of the mountain. But there is another reason why it's so windy up there, and it's complicated enough to demand a clipboard. All of our weather happens in the troposphere, the first 11 miles or so of our atmosphere, and the top of that layer acts as a sort of ceiling. You know what it's like when you squeeze the end of a garden hose and the water comes out more powerfully, more quickly, because it's squeezed through a narrower gap? It's exactly the same here. There's this. It's a precaution. The wind is forced through the gap between the top of the mountain and the top of the troposphere. That's a narrower gap, so it speeds up. And that's why
It always tends to be windy at the top of a hill. So wind is just air rushing from one place to another, speeding up as it goes through narrow gaps, slowing down as it hits obstacles. There are winds near the ground that blow locally, and ones high in the air that can blow long distances. And that is information you can use to your advantage.
Right, here's how to amaze your friends. First, stand with the wind at your back. Then you're looking for clouds. If those clouds are moving overhead, directly away from you, or directly towards you, or they're stationary, then the weather is going to stay broadly the same. If they're moving from left to right, it's going to get worse. If they're moving from right to left, it's going to improve.
So, right to left, better. Left to right, worse. Straight down the middle stays the same, as long as you have your back to the wind.
Unless you're in the southern hemisphere, in which case you reverse that bit. Brilliant, isn't it? Really clever. I mean, it's not 100% foolproof because weather's really complicated, but it works more often than not. And that's about as much as you can say of any form of weather forecasting, isn't it?
And the clouds must have been travelling right to left up on Mount Washington, because the next morning is truly spectacular. Unusually for this time of year, the cloud lifts and the wind subsides. Slightly. And I venture back outside into a suddenly magical landscape.
Folks around here quite proudly proclaim that it has the worst weather in the world. And, well, I don't know. I mean, severe, yes, but looking at it like this, worst, not so sure.
But there's no doubt that this is a place shaped by wind. It's so windy here that the buildings have to be chained down. Even the ice appears to fly off in frozen streamers. These streamers don't point away from the wind. They grow towards it. And here's how. Ice crystals are carried through the air by the wind. But the moment they touch an object, they freeze tight. The next ice crystal to be blown in freezes to the first, gradually building outwards in the direction they blew in from. And that gives me an idea.
I've thought of another way you can see wind. I looked around and a lot of the snow that I can see in the air isn't falling, it's been blown by the wind, sticking to any available surface. So, I've got a pocket full of this biodegradable confetti. Let's wait for a good gust.
Watch how the confetti blows in swirling patterns. You'd think that at these wind speeds everything would just get whisked away in a perfectly straight line, but it doesn't. It rolls and curls like waves crashing onto a beach, and occasionally those rolling eddies turn into tightly knit spirals in a shape scientists call a vortex. It's a shape that's crucial to our story, because almost all the weather we think of as extreme is based around them. This isn't just about strong winds, it's about the other types of weather that wind can produce. Dust devils, water spouts, tornadoes, all are spinning winds based on this vortex pattern. Even hurricanes and cyclones have the same spiral shape. But to see how those spirals come about, I'm going to examine perhaps the most unusual vortex of them all. It's called a firewhirl. And because they're made entirely of flames, it's easier to see the twisting structure. Right here is where I'm most likely to find one. The tinder dry forests of Western Australia. The vegetation here is so flammable that any stray match or lightning strike can have it ablaze in seconds. There are 50,000 bushfires a year in Australia, and almost any one of them is capable of creating a firewhirl. But because the fires are so impenetrable, and because firewhirls tend to be so short-lived, it's very rare to actually see one. Which is why the best way to examine a firewhirl is to build one.
But I'm not going to set about building a firewhirl on my own, which is why I brought two of the world's leading authorities on firewhirls over from Japan to help.
Dr. Kazunori Kawana and engineer Kozo Sekimoto have spent many years looking at how and why firewhirls spin. And they've agreed to lend us a hand to try and start our very own firewhirl.
But I've just discovered this is the first time they've built a full-scale one, which is a worry.
Especially when I see them messing about with baking tins. Of course, we have the fire authorities on hand. But at the moment, they look like they're just there to help with the washing up. Time to find out what's going on.
Chaps, baking tins. I'm intrigued. How does this work?
We are trying to create a firewall on top of the baking pans. We put heptane, a combustible liquid, in the pans.
Heptane, is that what that is?
Well, this is water.
You know that doesn't burn, don't you, at all?
We put heptane on top of the water layer.
I knew that. Okay, why are they arranged in this L configuration?
if the shape of fire is entirely symmetric, the swirling motion wouldn't occur. So we need some kind of trigger to create a swirling motion.
This shape, this asymmetry, somehow triggers something that we're going to see.
Exactly. Yes.
Good. Will it ultimately get rid of these flies? Because I see why you're wearing
Yeah,
these nets.
yeah.
I thought you were beekeepers when I arrived, but it's unimaginably unpleasant.
But this isn't merely an extreme type of pest control. We're going to see if these 30 baking tins can help us create a spinning vortex.
And we're not just going to be looking for this vortex effect here. We're also going to be looking from up there.
We need a bird's eye view if we're going to reveal what makes a wind spin. And this remote-controlled copter is the perfect way to get it.
That is why I've brought that guy.
That guy is the drone's pilot, Hai Tran. A man with 25 years' experience of flying remote cameras. I pop over to brief him on what we're after.
Right. So, if we get a firewall going out there, this spinning vortex, I need a shot directly over the top of it. As it forms, you there looking down will get the circle just there like that.
Right, so you want me to fly over a tornado that's breathing fire?
You've used very emotive language there. I mean, essentially, yes.
Okay.
I mean, yes.
Yeah, I think we're going to have problems there with all the wind and the heat that's coming off the fire. I think carbon fibre is pretty durable, but the propellers are plastic, so they'll probably melt off at some stage.
So how will you know if that starts happening? It'll, warn you. Because presumably, I mean, if you get closer and you hit the wind, you'll see it go all jiggly and you can go higher. I want you as
no,
close-
these things are stabilised. So the first thing we'll see is the copter heading towards the fire.
So the stabiliser will cancel out any effects of the heat until it melts.
Yes.
Turn the stabiliser off. well, go in raw.
Yeah, okay.
You can tell your friends, no stabiliser, and I flew it into the fiery tornado thing.
I mean, we're talking about 160 kilometre winds?
Yeah.
No.
I try to explain to Hai why fire is important to this whole story. Because heat can create winds. Let me demonstrate with this cooker. Now, imagine the hobs represent the earth being heated up by the sun. Hot air rises off the hob just as it does from the hot ground, making the air above the flames less dense, and therefore lower pressure. But the cold air around the oven is still at normal pressure, so it rushes in to fill the gap, turning these children's windmills. And we can prove that the air is rushing towards the flames with the smoke from this match. Higher pressure air rushing towards lower pressure air. That is the basis of wind. Using flames only accentuates the effect, which is why a massive fire is the best way to create our own extreme wind. But it still doesn't tell us how that extreme wind can start spinning. That is why we need the drone. So, here's the plan. First, we get a flammable liquid called heptane and fill the pans with it. Once they're all full, we'll set light to them. If Kazu and Kozo are right, their L-shape arrangement will spontaneously trigger a fire whirl. Next, we'll introduce some coloured smoke to see if our eye in the sky can capture the wind patterns at work. Right, let's give it a go. Time to stand well back. At first, it all seems a bit underwhelming. It looks, well, it looks like 30 baking tins on fire. But as cold air rushes in, it feeds the flames. And then, quite suddenly, they begin to spin.
There it is.
The spin seems to intensify the fire even more. The flames grow higher and higher until they tower above us.
It's massive.
A real-life fire whirlwind. And it seems that Hai is prepared to give it a go after all.
I'm in 20.
Roger that.
If he can get close enough, then we've a chance of seeing how a fire whirl actually works.
There's turbulence up there.
Yeah, roger that.
Remember, they have no way of seeing that turbulence.
I think we're getting a bit close to the fire, Sam.
He won't know he's in trouble until the controls stop responding and the copter literally melts out of the air.
That's looking great, mate.
Okay, so now for the tricky bit, trying to see how our fire whirlwind was formed.
Just like we did with the cooker, we're going to introduce some smoke. The crosswind is so strong that the smoke stays close to the ground, and on the far side, it blows in a pretty straight line. But on this side, parts of it bend round the L shape and get sucked in towards it.
Let me try and explain what's happening here. Here's our L. And when the wind comes from this direction, it rolls around the end of it here, and it's drawn towards this fire. But it's also drawn towards this one here, and that sets it spinning. That starts our vortex. The vortex rolls along the long arm of the L, and when it gets to the fire here, it intensifies. And this is where our fire whirl is formed.
The cold air carrying the smoke on the inside of the L is being pulled in two directions at once. And it's that that creates those little spinning swirls of green smoke. And ultimately, the fire whirl our team managed to successfully capture on camera. Now, obviously, you don't generally find baking pans in the wild, but natural L's occur when two separate fire fronts meet, each creating their own opposing winds. And that's also pretty much how other types of spinning weather start. Two or more winds meeting at different angles and speeds. Some rising warm air and cold air rushing in to fill the gap. Just those simple ingredients can produce some of the most extreme forms of weather we have, including the most powerful and deadly wind of them all, the tornado. Because a tornado is spinning, it can move far faster than a normal wind. Not in a straight line, but in the speed that they can spin. And it's that spin that does the damage.
Look at it this way. If I'm spinning this bucket around my head, it's not how fast I'm walking towards you that dictates how hard it will hit you when I get there. Even if I walk really quickly, that speed's irrelevant. It's how fast I'm spinning the bucket that matters, and what's in it to add to the weight. And that's how it is with a tornado. Debris does most of the damage. That's the weight in the bucket. The most destructive force in the tornado itself is its spin, its rotational speed. Which is why it's remarkable. That's the part of a tornado we know the least about.
I'd like to find out why. And who better to ask than the Center for Severe Weather Research in Boulder, Colorado. I make an appointment with its president, Josh Werman, to ask him why that spin speed is still such a mystery.
Scientists have gotten very good at measuring the winds above the ground in the tornado, maybe from 50 meters above the ground up to a couple kilometers. But the strongest winds in the tornado are below that. We think the strongest winds in the tornado might even be below 10 meters. Using remote sensing with radars, we can get up close, we can scan back and forth, but unfortunately, objects block us. There's debris, pieces of houses, cows, whatever, flying around in the tornado, and that's the one place where we are the most blind.
Why isn't there just a machine that you can point at a tornado and measure it? I mean, it is moving past. Why can't you just measure it?
There are two main challenges with in situ measurements. The first is how to get something inside the tornado. The tornado is moving down the fields and we don't know exactly how it's going. It's an unpredictable path. So getting something in front is very, very hard. Challenge number two is what happens when we succeed, and that is the tornado runs over the object and destroys it. So unfortunately, the place that we most need to know about is the place that's hardest for us to see. If we can understand that better, then engineers will be able to build better buildings, we'll be able to have better shelters, and fewer people will get injured and die in tornadoes.
But how would you begin to measure the speed of a tornado right next to the ground? To try and find that out, we must travel another 1,300 miles to the distinctly un-tornado-like landscape of London, Ontario. And one remarkable building.
I'm going to do something a person wouldn't normally do. I'm going in. I'm in. This is it. I'm in the eye of it. And all I can say is, yes, this feels as amazing as I suspect it looks. I'm in a tornado. It's the most astonishing feeling. It's dizzying. The world is roaring past and spinning round me, but I'm still. This is massively scaled down, of course. A real one would be maybe 100 times bigger, and the wind moving 4 or 5 times faster, but nevertheless, you get a sense of the relentless, terrifying power of one of these things in the wild. That is the most daunting sight. I've got goosebumps, and not just because it's cold in here. I can feel the edges of it. Feel it moving. It's like I'm touching its flanks. It is a living, breathing thing. It's a living, breathing, furious thing.
This is the Wind Engineering, Energy and Environment Research Institute, or WINDY for short. And it's the only place on the planet capable of duplicating the real-life dynamics of a tornado. It does it by using 106 giant fans hidden behind the walls and ceiling of the world's first hexagonal wind tunnel. The whole structure cost $23 million. And it isn't even officially open yet. We're pretty much the first visitors to set foot inside. Which makes it all the more delicate asking its boss, Professor Horia Hangen, for a little favour. Just while we're here, in this facility, I'd really like to just have a little look at velocities sort of that way, in tornadoes. Can we have a... I'm not going to say it's experiment a bit with it. Do you mind if we make a bit of a mess? Not a massive mess. There might be... We'll sweep up. You won't know we've been here. Everything will be gone.
That's fine. We can do a little bit of a mess here, so we are prepared to catch some stuff that you throw into it. So
Might happen. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Good for him. He's trusting us with his $23 million baby.
Right, plan. They really have let me experiment with this incredible installation, and I want to look more into velocity, see how fast the wind is moving. And if I introduce these ping pong balls into our tornado, I can measure the speed. I'm going to feed them to it.
We think of tornadoes as sucking up everything in their path. Turns out it's not that easy. I retreat to the control room, where the professor and I spend the next 4 hours trying to get something, anything, to actually fly inside the tornado. With no luck. And then I think of the confetti on Mount Washington. What we need is something flat and light. We find these pink foam squares. They're similar to the confetti, but because they're substantially bigger, it should be easier to track their progress. If we can get those foam squares trapped in the tornado, and if we can get them lifted up and spun round without being spat out, then we might be able to time how long it takes one to do a full lap. That is a lot of ifs, I know, but fingers crossed.
We're gonna start the fans.
see. There it is.
Good.
Yeah, yeah. That's fantastic. There it is. That's exactly what we wanted. So they're held in. Okay, now we've got the foam squares circling successfully, it's time to turn on the tracking technology. The computer follows individual squares, one after another, so it can create an average speed from the different trajectories. And it works. According to the computer, it's spinning at a shade over 22 miles an hour. The first time one has ever been measured this near the ground. Now, obviously, a real tornado is about 100 times bigger and much, much faster. But now we know we can fly things in a fake tornado.
It stands to reason we can get them to fly inside a real one. Problem is, how are we going to get them in there? I'm not standing next to it with a bucket. I have tried some things. None of them really worked. I need help with this.
So I've made contact with a scientist who says he might have a solution. He's asked me to meet him here in, well, as it turns out, the middle of nowhere. This bizarre vehicle is the Dominator 3, a hand-built tornado-proof armored car. And as meteorologist Reed Timmer explains, it's one of a kind.
There's no other vehicle like this. It's just one big meteorological instrument. It's like a mobile tornado probe.
Has it ever been in the base of a tornado?
This has. This is the Dominator 3, so this is brand new last year, and we intercepted 3 or 4 tornadoes.
What happened to Dominators 1 and 2?
Gone? Oh, no, they're still on the ground, thankfully.
What I want to know is, what are the chances of using the Dominator to measure the speed of a tornado near the ground?
Near the base of the tornado is one of the biggest mysteries of tornado science, and it's also the most important to understand because it's those wind speeds that directly impact the structures and cause the destruction that we see with tornadoes every spring and summer. That's why we built this vehicle, is to get up close and not inside those and unravel those mysteries.
So if you could get this into a tornado, you could deploy something into it that'll allow you physically to measure that rotational wind speed. It is roughly what I was doing with bits of foam in the indoor artificial tornado. It's just with the real one. Yeah, it is presumably then quite incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, there is a level of risk involved, but as a storm chaser, all I've done since I was 18 years old is get close to tornadoes.
Which really begs just one question.
Are you a scientist, an adrenaline junkie, or a lunatic?
Probably all of the above.
Okay.
Reed sounds like the perfect person for us. Using the Dominator, he can get really close to a tornado, and he's already thought about how he could fire a data recording probe right into it.
So I wanted to stop right here.
Yeah.
Because just south of our position, right down there, was a F5 tornado back in 1999, and they recorded the strongest wind speeds ever recorded on the planet, over 300 miles an hour right down here just to our south.
In less than 21 hours, 74 tornadoes touched down in the states of Oklahoma and Kansas. The most prolific outbreak in history. But the most destructive of them all was right here. In the 60 minutes or so of its existence, its phenomenal spin speed caused more than $1 billion worth of damage. Scientists measured the winds inside it at 300 miles an hour. But those speeds don't tell the whole story.
Those winds were measured higher up above the ground, and who knows how strong those wind speeds were right near the Earth's surface with the strongest tornado in history.
And that came through right where we are.
Yeah.
So, if this were a real situation, what do you say? Hot, live, whatever. If it were coming towards us, and you're here with this, what happens now?
Well, we'll look to the southwest. If it's not moving side to side at all, it's likely coming right at us. So I'll line up that left edge and make sure we're in the path. Then we'll drop the vehicle flush to the ground. I'll show you here really quick. And we're inside, of course.
But yeah, that would be a good idea.
There it
Okay.
goes.
That's supposed to happen.
Yeah. And then the spikes also go into the ground. And then there's the probe, right there. And the parachute will pop up when it's at peak flight, just 50 feet up, and it gets sucked into the tornado.
So if everything's worked perfectly, that probe will have gone out of there and ended up in the tornado, spinning around and getting that critical rotational speed.
Yeah, the tornado will pick it up. There's updrafts in the funnel as well. It'll pick up the parachute. It'll spiral around inside, measuring temperature, moisture, and pressure at a rate of 5 times a second.
And all of that will happen.
It's going to one of these years. Hopefully this year.
Good luck. Good luck with that. You never know.
So, there we have it. The Dominator is going to take the place of our woman with the bucket. And its compressed air-powered roof cannon does the job my catapult and paintball gun couldn't. Now all they need to do is find a real-life tornado and park next to it.
Obviously that could take a very long time, so Reed and his team are on their own from now on. No film crew with them, just them and the Dominator, and a very ambitious mission.
It actually takes 6 weeks, but finally Reed and his crew are hot on the heels of a real-life twister. The trick now is to get as close as they dare, close enough to fire a probe straight into its heart. But finding that heart turns out to be pretty tricky.
On it. That's our GPS position. That's the tornado. About 2 miles to our southeast. We're getting real close. It's right here. Oh, we have this.
A tornado can travel at about 70 miles an hour across the ground
Right here, guys. Stop right here.
and change direction frequently and without warning, which makes getting ahead of one incredibly difficult. And they need to get to it quick. The lifespan of the average twister is just 5 to 10 short minutes.
All right, just go, just go.
There it is. On the horizon. See? Tornado on the ground. Right there. Straight ahead. Got it, got it, got it. Straight ahead. Go! Oh, that's huge.
It is huge. About 100 meters across and at least a kilometer tall.
Perfect. Fix it. Look stop. Look stop.
Oh my God. The tornado is coming straight for them.
Coming right at us. Get ready to shoot. Right here.
It's perfect.
Boy, Kevin. Boy. Drop it down.
Not the best time for the Dominator's window to fail.
Pull your window up, Reed. You have to pull your window up.
We're in it. We're in it. Boy, let me wet. Right here. We're in it. We're in it. We're in it. Dude, shoot the ball. It's right there next to us. I see you all the way around. It went one full revolution.
It's in. They got the probe inside.
I saw it make one full revolution, then I lost visual on it, so I know it at least went around one time.
But that's only half the challenge. Now they need to retrieve it to find out what it recorded. They wait for the storm to pass, then set off out through the trail of devastation in search of the probe.
So how far ahead do you think it is?
It's probably about 3 miles outside.
For some reason, they're not picking up its GPS signal, so they're reduced to searching on foot.
When I launched it, I saw it go out over the road that way, spun around like this, all the way around, and it descended either behind these trees or these trees right here. So we're within a couple 100 feet of it right now.
Okay, so it's got to be somewhere over this way, over here.
I had full visual.
Against all the odds, they spot it. But the probe is damaged. Its trip around the twister has torn away the housing, leaving the electronics exposed. So were they successful? The moment I get word, I'm straight on to Reed to find out. Hi, Reed.
Hey, Richard.
You got the thing into a tornado.
Yes, we did.
Was that a special moment?
It was a very special moment,
Yeah.
and it was a very scary moment, too, honestly. I think I might be getting a little too old for these tornado intercepts, but our ears were popping from the pressure fall. It was a pretty intense tornado, and seeing the probe take off was definitely an amazing feeling.
So you've got it. You've got the probe.
Yep.
The information is stored on it, and what we want to know is the speed at the base and at the different heights in the tornado. That data is possibly on the probe.
I'm betting it's on the probe.
Okay.
But we'll be able to get it off here. It should be any week, any day now. And
We've got so close. I mean, yeah, there it is. A lot of
we'll do
that.
both of them.
Okay.
Reed and his team have accomplished something that no one has ever done before. They've managed to get a flying probe into the base of a tornado.
We did it!
So
today is the first time we've recovered one that we know is inside a tornado. So this is a huge success for our science mission, and I'd say this is definitely a stepping stone for things to come in the future.
It's a proud moment. Unfortunately, the probe turned out to be too badly damaged, so they're planning on doing it all over again. We've discovered what winds are and how they begin, how their paths can be used to predict the weather. We've seen the way a wind can start to spin, and how spinning winds are the basis for much of our extreme weather. More than anything, we're one step closer to revealing one of weather's greatest mysteries: how fast a tornado can spin. But for the moment, the actual answer is still a weather secret. Next time, I try and capture a cloud to see just how much one really weighs.
This is a fairly unusual exercise, cloud collecting.
I discover what would happen if rain fell in one big lump. I test the astounding hardness of hail and the unbelievable speed of an avalanche.
Speechless. Genuinely speechless.
You can find out more about wild weather with the Open University's free wall poster. Call 0845 030 3045 or go to bbc.co.uk/wildweather and follow the links to the Open University.
The forecast for more wild weather. Same